Eastern Europe has a high population of Romas, and they don't actually have a state. And so we looked and found that Romania has one of the highest populations of Roma people, and so that's really
So this is how interesting your presentation is, Ilona.
For the Roma people, and you might have heard the term gypsy. We're talking about the Romas. Roma is the more politically correct term that's used these days. And I thought it was interesting. The woman, the educator, pointed out that even if there are success stories of Roma people who come out of their, I like that she said, self-perpetuating poverty, because that's exactly what it is. It's just this cycle. People don't often talk about that, but it's like the thing that people do is point out the negative part of Romas. They're generally hated wherever they are. Let's see here. The people group originated in northern India. Their dialect is really similar to a dialect that people speak in northern India, and they suppose they came over to the Balkan region about 1,000 years ago, and the Balkans are what make up most of Eastern Europe. And they're on every they're on every continent that's not Antarctica, but there's still a very high concentration in the Balkan region. And Romania has 8.32% of its population is Romanian. When they came over from India, they were outcast because of their dark skin. They were enslaved, and that just began this cycle of centuries of persecution and discrimination. There are accounts during medieval times of them being tortured and killed, and they were forbade to marry one another or have children, and people would push them out of society, just very, very, very oppressed. During World War II, the Roma were a people who were targeted by the Nazis, and there were 2 million who were exterminated. And more recently, under the Soviet Union, women into the 80s underwent forced sterilization so that their community wouldn't continue to be populated. And so you can only imagine what that does to a culture's psyche. Just centuries of constant oppression, discrimination, persecution. They are isolated. And that's why you saw in the documentary, they were in that ghetto because as they are isolated, many of them, like the children, are born and they don't have proper documents, and so they can't get an education, they can't have a stable job, they can't afford housing, they can't have access to medical care or social services, and even sometimes when they do have access to those, because they're Roma, they're denied access to those. There's just crazy discrimination. And so, you can imagine that their situation sets them up to be extremely vulnerable to be exploited in various ways. Children are probably the most targeted. They're trafficked for forced begging, forced crime. A lot of family members sell their children into illegal adoption agencies internationally, and women as well are sold into prostitution around the world, with a high concentration in Western Europe. And Ilona, over here you can see, is a master painter, and she's doing a visual illustration of a story of a girl that Miriam has finished for us.
So this is a story about a girl. She's 16 years old and her name is Lumanitsa. Lumanitsa has grown up in the Roma community in Fernazzi, a ghetto in Bucharest. She and her family do not have legal documents to be living there. And they are suffering from discrimination from local authorities as well as potential employers. This has kept them from gaining a steady home. And for as long as she knows, they have been moving around from house to house in the furnitures of the city and stuck in a cycle of poverty. She was used to her parents fighting growing up. And when she was 9 years old, her mother suffered from serious physical injuries at the hand of her father, which led her mom to turn to the police for help. But because she was Roma, the police left the parents spit on her face and turned her away. So Lumanitsa lost her trust in the police. And it was also at this time that Lumanitsa was pulled out of school in order to help her sister mother with caring for young children. And for years, she saw how friends and neighbors were forced into arranged marriages with often abusing kind as her mother. And Lumanitsa, she dreaded the day when her parents forced her to marry. And one day, the relative who lived down the street from Lomanica told her that he had a new job in Germany, that she could make a lot of money and send back to the family. So her younger siblings would go to school and even maybe save up money for an education for herself. In her mind, her only two options were to accepting this job or being forced into marriage and never escaping the cycle of poverty she grew up in. Without telling her parents, she chose to go with a man to create a new life for herself in Germany. When she got there, this kind of man quickly faded, and he told her that she was to work in prostitution until she paid back the money he spent on her transportation. She was trying to escape an endless cycle of poverty and find herself in a cycle even worse.
Okay, so Lumenica is representative of thousands of people. It's just one story. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the trafficking network. So according to the TIP report, 2/3 of all Roma trafficking victims are recruited by people that they know. So it's friends, it's relatives, it's neighbors. The Roma people have a really tight community, so they don't trust outsiders very easily. So Roma are typically trafficked by other Roma people. A particularly troubling part of the whole Roma trafficking network is this phenomenon of older homeless children picking out younger homeless children. And this happens in large cities, particularly Bucharest. This is sort of a holdover from the Soviet Union collapse of the Soviet Union when orphanages just weren't able to run anymore. So the children were left on the street, and then this process of child abuse began. So yeah, like I said, those who traffic Roma are typically also ethnically Roma themselves, and they are known to be more violent. So Roma traffickers are typically more violent than even ethnically Romanian traffickers. So their main form of control is violence. And there are also a large number of wealthy, powerful crime bosses. So the young, Roma teenage boys who start out in the mafia and they see this lucrative human trafficking business and they go into that. And then they go on to lead lives of luxury while running these large networks. And then looking at the third aspect of the trade demand, Romani women are trafficked all over the world, but particularly in the EU because of travel, or the lack of travel restrictions. The Czech Republic has been selected as the main destination country for Roma women. And also because of the Roma tradition of arranged marriages, many Roma men are the demand in the context of forced marriage.
Expectation. Now we can talk about advocacy. And first of all, the trafficking. Like one thing which is good in Romania that there is a law about trafficking, and it's illegal. And in some ways, if you look at the description of what the trafficking is, well, trafficking is forcing a person into doing something that the person didn't give a consent to, and even receiving for it money. And very often in buying the bride, or even when two families agree that their children will get married, the side of the husband, or potential husband, is paying for the side of the bride without her consent, so it could be viewed as a form of human trafficking. There are around 450 cases each year of human trafficking, and average penalty is from 3 until 15 years, so it's like relatively small as well. But if the victim is killed, victim of human trafficking, then it's 25 years. However, if you look at the Romas in Romania, Romas in Romania look down upon very much, and as well as the same as the police. Like police can just laugh with them and don't really take their case seriously, which really doesn't help to implement this law on them. And also the other problem that many Romas don't have documents. This law about human trafficking, it speaks about the citizens of Romania, then there will be, like, case will be in Romania. If they are citizens of other country, then the documents can be restored, and the Romanian doesn't get to to Romanian border. But if you look, and also if the documents are lost, then they can request the new documents. But in the case of Romanians, if they don't have documents, if they are not even, if they have lived and grown up in Romania, but they are not officially registered there, then basically they are not citizens of any country, which makes it really difficult for them to get legal rights. Next one. So next one is about specific about prostitution, and in Romania, prostitution is illegal in all parts. It's illegal to be prostitute, illegal to prostitute someone, illegal to own a brothel, and also illegal to purchase sex. But I would say like the really positive part in that is that there is a law which says that if the prostitute who has been trafficked and prostituted goes to the police and she reports the trafficker, then she will not be judged under the sentence of prostitution. So in that way, what she's doing is illegal, but if she has been forced into it, she will not be sentenced for that. Yeah.
Okay, so just a few of the things that happen as far as aftercare. In 2009, the Romanian government started to work hard to end trafficking. So it looked like a really good thing, they were caring about the issue a little more. But what actually happened is they stopped funding all of the NGOs. So government aid increased and help that was actually helping decreased. And an example of this is the government took over victim identification, and the rate of, or the number of victims identified promptly dropped. The government, however, does provide a national trafficking hotline, but this operates only during weekday work hours. So, yeah, that's not great. And it does not guarantee victim protection and prosecution, because prosecution is illegal. So the inadequate government services are particularly bad for Roma people. They almost never receive government aid because of their isolated communities, because of ethnic discrimination, and then naturally their reluctance to go to the police in the first place. There are several great NGOs working in Romania, and the first one is Reaching Out Romania. They provide shelters, they do street outreach, and they also do prevention programs in schools. And another one is Open Door Foundation, and this one provides an emergency shelter, and it also partners with Starbucks to give survivors job training and job opportunities. And Not For Sale also works in the area providing aftercare, and they provide shelter, education, and prevention programs for adults and children, and they also provide jobs for survivors in agriculture.
So, this is the problem, and yeah, what do we do to change it? What can we do about it? And as you heard, the Romas, they are a very discriminated group, and yeah, we think to solve the problem with human trafficking, we also need to target the real problem with this discrimination and exclusion. And that was makes them vulnerable. And as we learned from Laura Bethel, for example, sorry, I have a loose tooth, so I can't really speak so good, but yeah, I hope you hear what I'm saying anyway. And like that was makes them very vulnerable, keeping them out of education and also out of employment. So, and human trafficking is very much the exploitation of vulnerability. And I think the Romas are a very good example of a vulnerable group and how that is like the perfect target for exploitation. But how do we do that then? How do we end like this discrimination of a people group that's been discriminated for like centuries and seems to be not welcome wherever they go? And like this is the question, like how do we change the mindset of people in the country? And how do we work against it? And we think that in this part, the EU could be a big part of this. Because Romania is a part of the European Union, and I think EU can be used as a positive force to put pressure on Romania's government to actually do something about it. And like for the other countries in the EU to actually raise up and say like this is not okay, like how you treat your citizens and how you treat these people is not okay, and you need to do something about it. And you can do that in many different ways, like positive pressure, like funding money for projects, but also like just acknowledging the situation, like and just say like this is not okay. And it's not only Romania, of course, it's also like in other countries like Bulgaria, for example. And and also like about changing the mindset. And here I would really like, I think the churches have a really big part to play. Because what if like Christians in Romania from both sides, both from non-ethnic Romas and ethnic Romas, would stand up and say like, hey, we're brothers and sisters in Christ, and show unity and be a good example of what it is to see each other and acknowledge each other as brothers and sisters and be a good example. So I really hope that the church in Romania can take a big part in this. And like to start even with the kids. I think when we want to change the culture, we need to start with the kids. So I really hope that we, like next generation, we can change the mindset and how we look at each other. And there are also some things that we can do about aftercare and prevention, because as you heard, the aftercare and also the prevention is many times the Romas, they don't get access to it because they've been isolated. So I think, or the team report I think as well, suggests that the government should really see so that like these social services are actually available for the Roma communities as well. And we heard about the laws and about that there's a law. There's a law also to protect victims, but this law is not so very much used because studies show that actually the police, they don't have like the knowledge how to treat trafficking victims, so often victims get persecuted. So the police needs like education how to deal with this, and also how to deal with Romas, like how to deal with, acknowledge them as a vulnerable group, and actually like cultural differences even, and how to work with them in a good way. And also another thing about NGOs is that, I don't know if you said it, but since some years ago, the governments are not funding NGOs that they used to help. So that would be a good thing, that the government can actually start funding NGOs so they can do the work better. And yeah, God's heart for this. I can just share like a personal testimony about this. Like over the last like 5 years or something, because of the free movement in the EU, the Roma situation, the vulnerable situation has really been like acknowledged within the whole Europe. Like for example, just in Sweden, there's a lot of Romas from Romania coming to Sweden and begging on the streets because they don't have any other options in their country. And this raises either it can raise like an awareness that we need to do something about it, we need to acknowledge these people and actually like these are our brothers and sisters, or it raises in some cases even more like hate against this people group, because people get irritated because like what are they doing in our streets, we don't want them here, like begging. It's like annoying to see them. So it raises like two different streams. Either you can get more like caring about it and actually acknowledge that we need to do something, or the other stream, which I see in Europe, which is really dangerous, is that they get even more discriminated and they're not welcome anywhere. So, and this is very much related to human trafficking as well. So, yeah.
And we were thinking the opposite spirit of discrimination is celebration. And so I think we think celebration is so powerful because it looks at darkness and it points out joy and it brings light and it breaks apart shame. And the Roma culture, I just was thinking of Esmeralda from Notre Dame. Like you think of her and she has this like beautiful skirt and her coins, and the Roma culture is like vastly influenced music like jazz and bolero and flamenco.